The mansion lights were still glowing when Claire dropped the keys on the kitchen counter, for the last time. The silence was deafening, yet her daughter's voice echoed in her mind like a blade. "If you can't pay any more, then what do we even have left, Mom?" Claire took a deep breath, pulled her phone from her handbag, and tapped send. The email she had just written announced the bankruptcy of the empire she had spent 30 years building. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a plan no one saw coming. A plan that would change everything. Have you ever wondered how far a woman must go to uncover the truth? Stay with me, this story is for you. Claire Whitmore. A name respected by many, feared by some, admired by most. Owner of a luxury spa chain stretching from New York to Miami, her name appeared in business magazines, her smile in charity events, her brand associated with elegance and perfection. She never missed a meeting. Never showed weakness. Never stopped, at least not when people were watching. But Claire did stop. In secret. She stopped to cry in the bathroom, faucet running so no one would hear. She stopped to stare at old family photos, wondering when everything unraveled. When her children stopped seeing her as a mother, and started treating her like a retirement plan. Ever since her husband died, suddenly, from a heart attack on a crisp autumn afternoon, Claire had carried everything alone. She raised Avery and Ryan between business meetings, spreadsheets, and sleepless nights. She paid for private schools, therapy sessions, family vacations. She gave them freedom, structure, opportunity. And in return, they gave her demands. "You can't stop now. What are we supposed to do without you? At least get everything sorted before you disappear." Sorted. That's all they wanted from her. But what if she wanted disorder? Silence. A little peace. That night, sitting alone on the porch with a forgotten glass of wine and a blanket around her shoulders, Claire stared at her aging hands. Hands that built an empire. Hands that nursed fevers and signed layoffs with equal grace. And she asked herself, if I disappeared, who would come looking for me, not for what I give, but for who I am? Claire grew up in a small town in North Carolina, where the streets were named after flowers, and neighbors still left fresh cakes on each other's porches. At just 22 years old, with 2 small children and a cosmetology certificate earned through sleepless nights, she opened her first beauty salon. It was modest, 3 chairs, a broken hairdryer, and a wall she painted herself. But it had soul. And clients. Because Claire didn't just know how to cut hair. She knew how to listen. And how to care. Little by little, her name started to circulate among the right people. First, an influential boutique owner. Then, the mayor's wife. And eventually, a New York socialite who vacationed in the area and fell in love with Claire's personalized treatments. That was when everything changed. Claire began to travel. She learned international techniques. Created her own signature protocols. She became a reference in high-end wellness. The salon turned into a franchise. The franchise grew into a network. And the network became Claire Whitmore Wellness Group. With locations in 4 states and over 100 employees. But the higher she climbed, the lonelier she felt. Avery, her oldest daughter, grew up with everything Claire never had. Private schools. Vacations abroad. Violin lessons. French. Etiquette classes. Claire hoped she was preparing her for the world. But maybe, she only shielded her from what truly matters, empathy. Avery got her business degree, funded entirely by Claire. And walked straight into the company with the title of Director of Expansion. A fancy title for very little responsibility. She'd show up late. Leave early. And wore her company badge like a trophy, not a commitment. You need to modernize, Mom. This wellness concept is outdated. The company needs my vision, not your nostalgia. Claire would listen, breathe deeply, and respond with kindness. But inside, it hurt. Ryan, the youngest, was a different kind of weight. Gentler. More lost. Since he turned 20, he bounced from course to course. "I'm finding my purpose," he'd say. But every phase ended the same way. "Mom, can you help with the rent? It's just a one-time emergency. You've always believed in me, you're not giving up on me now, right?" And Claire never said no. But each yes came with a quiet sting. The fear that if she stopped being useful, she'd stop being loved. Susan, her best friend and former business partner, was the only one who never asked for anything more than honest company and a warm cup of tea. Susan always showed up when Claire burned herself out trying to hold the world together. She understood Claire's silences better than anyone. She knew exactly when to bring soup, and when to simply sit and listen. But even Susan had grown distant lately. Because even friendship, when uncared for, fades. The final straw came on Claire's 60th birthday. She planned a small, meaningful celebration. Lavender candles. Homemade dishes. Old family photos spread across the table like guests she longed to see again. Avery arrived late, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Ryan didn't show at all. Claire cut the cake alone. And when she tried to open up about her exhaustion, about maybe selling the company, maybe stepping back, Avery responded with total indifference. "You're overreacting. If you sell everything, what's going to be left for us?" It was there. In that sentence. That cold, casual cruelty. That Claire understood. She wouldn't explain anything anymore. She would show them. 2 days after that lonely birthday night, Claire arrived early at the company headquarters. The mirrored building reflected the bright blue sky. As if trying to hide the storm clouds forming inside her. She rode the elevator in silence. It moved slowly, as if it, too, felt the weight of what was about to unfold. Inside her glass-walled office, the view was magnificent. Skyscrapers, busy streets, the muffled pulse of the city beneath her feet. But Claire couldn't connect to any of it anymore. She saw no beauty. Only distance. She walked to the window and rested her forehead against the cold glass. Below, life went on. People rushing, bumping into each other, laughing, shouting on the phone. And there she was, frozen. Alone. Wearing a flawless blazer. Hair pinned to perfection. On the outside, the picture of a successful CEO. On the inside, a woman exhausted. Craving nothing more than to disappear. The sound of the door interrupted her thoughts. Avery walked in without knocking, as always, and dropped a thick stack of documents onto the desk without so much as a "good morning. I need your signature on these contracts. We closed a deal with the Palm Beach Resort. It's a huge opportunity. Want to read it all or just sign?" Claire turned slowly, picked up the papers, flipped through a few pages, and stopped. "Did you even read the terms?" Avery scoffed, impatient. "Of course not. I don't have time for that, Mom. I trust legal. And by the way, when are you transferring the company to me officially? Waiting around for your goodwill isn't exactly an efficient strategy." Silence. Claire let the papers slide back onto the desk. Then looked up at her daughter. As if seeing her for the very first time. And maybe, she was. The woman standing before her wasn't the little girl who used to make bead bracelets on Saturdays while Claire painted the salon walls. She was cold. Distant. Shaped by a world that rewarded ambition and punished emotion. Claire let out a quiet sigh. "Do you know what it means to go bankrupt?" Avery raised a brow, confused. "What kind of question is that?" Claire stood, walked slowly to the window, and spoke in a low, steady voice. Bankruptcy is more than losing money. It's when everything collapses. The clients leave. The staff quits. The suppliers stop replying. It's when you realize, behind the structure, there's no one left who's truly there for you. She turned slowly. Bankruptcy is realizing you built an empire, but you're alone on the throne. Avery looked like she was about to answer, but stopped. Claire returned to her chair, calm and poised. I'm going to show you what it really means to depend on me. And what happens when I stop carrying the weight of the world I built alone. The air grew thick with tension. Avery narrowed her eyes. Is that a threat? Claire smiled. But there was no fire behind it, just quiet exhaustion. No, sweetheart. It's simply the end of the mother as a bank era. That very night, Claire didn't go home. She spent hours driving with no destination. Through neighborhoods she hadn't seen in decades. Parking in random lots, turning off the radio. Listening only to the muffled hum of the engine. In the passenger seat sat an envelope, handwritten. For when you finally decide to disappear. She had written it months ago. A silent plan. An unspoken scream. A sign that something inside her had been breaking for a long time. At 2 a.m., she pulled into an empty gas station. Opened her laptop. The subject line of the email she typed read: Urgent restructuring, immediate closure of operations. And in the body: asterisk due to operational crises and internal disagreements. Whitmore Wellness is entering assisted bankruptcy proceedings. All branches will be closed progressively. Headquarters will be liquidated within 90 days. CEO Claire Whitmore hereby resigns from all executive roles. Signed, Claire Whitmore, asterisk. She read it. Read it again. Didn't change a word. And clicked send. By the next day, the world around her had collapsed. Avery posted a dramatic statement on social media. An old photo of the two of them at a corporate gala. The caption read: asterisk, my mother is having a breakdown. We're trying to get her help. She destroyed everything it took 30 years to build. Asterisk. In the comments, strangers spoke of ungrateful children. Others speculated she had been betrayed by business partners. No one knew the truth. Ryan showed up at the mansion in tears. Mom, what's going to happen to me now? I had bills. I had plans. I loved you so much. But Claire was already gone. Before disappearing, she did 3 things. 1. She left her phone in the nightstand drawer. Turned off, like the final period at the end of a sentence. 2. She transferred her entire personal savings into a private fund under the name C. Miller. With restricted access and managed by Susan, her only confidant. 3. She chose a new name. A lighter one. An invisible one. Claire Miller. She bought a one-way ticket. Destination, Maple Bay. A small coastal town where no one knew her name. When she arrived, she rented a simple cottage. Old wooden walls, large windows. And a faint scent of sea salt and lavender. The landlady didn't ask many questions. She simply smiled and said gently, "There's something healing about this place. People who come here, they're usually recovering from something." Claire smiled back. It was true. But starting over from zero was harder than she imagined. The first few days were too quiet. No phone notifications. No meetings. No emails. The silence she had once craved also hurt. She began walking along the beach every day. Sometimes just to feel the wind on her face. And remind herself she was still alive. She cooked for one. but always set 2 plates at the table. As if deep down, she still hoped someone might show up. Someone who wouldn't ask for anything. Just stay. Slowly, new habits began to take root. A blue notebook where she wrote down reflections. A small shelf of second-hand books, left behind by the previous tenant. And a cracked ceramic mug that quickly became her favorite. It was on a cloudy afternoon, while dragging a heavy cabinet into the cottage, that Claire met Tom Benson. He appeared at the gate, carrying a toolbox and wearing a curious expression. "You know that could throw your back out, right?" "Maybe that's what I'm trying to do," she replied, almost laughing. He chuckled, and something softened between them. Tom didn't ask about her past. Didn't wonder where she came from. He just offered his hand, as if to say, "I can help, if you want me to." And Claire, for the first time in a very long time, said yes. Maple Bay was the complete opposite of the life Claire had left behind. Here, no one rushed. The grocery store still packed goods in brown paper bags. People held doors for each other and greeted with a simple nod. Windows stayed open, even when it rained. And the days passed slowly. At first, the slowness unsettled her. She had lived by scheduled meetings, video calls, real-time data. Now, the only chart she followed was the tide schedule in the local newspaper. And strangely, that began to soothe her. Claire Miller, as she now called herself, had moved into a small wooden cottage, just 2 blocks from the ocean. The floor creaked under her bare feet. The internet barely worked. And the kettle squealed so loud each morning, it sounded like a grumpy old woman complaining. But there was peace. Peace in the sunrise walks. Peace in the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. Peace in sitting quietly on the porch, tea in hand, watching the world go on, without her at the center of it. During those first days, Claire simply observed. The neighbors. The market. The children playing. And herself. Her own movements. How she hesitated to smile. How hard it was to sleep without a mental to-do list. The discomfort of having no one depending on her. Because, who are we, when there's no one left to save? One morning, Tom Benson crossed her path again. "You again?" she said, spotting him pushing a bookshelf on a modified bicycle. "Maple Bay's too small to disappear in, Claire." "Good thing I didn't come here to disappear," she replied, surprising herself. "I came here, to listen. To myself." Tom smiled, a quiet smile, the kind that made silence feel like comfort, not pressure. Over time, he became a regular presence. But never intrusive. He brought fresh bread on Thursdays. Invited her to poetry readings at the town library. And showed up on Sundays just to see if she needed help fixing something. Even though he knew she could do it on her own. Claire never shared her past. And Tom never asked. It was as if he instinctively knew. She needed to be seen as just herself. Not a CEO. Not a mother. Not someone's wife. Just Claire. She began to cook again. Simple things. Soups made with herbs from the neighbor's garden. Gluten-free breads that never quite rose, but tasted perfect with tea. And between batches, she'd write in her blue notebook. Fragments of thought. Today, I could hear myself breathe, without rushing. I wonder if this is what my mother felt, sewing in silence. Maybe being useless to others is the start of being useful to myself. One afternoon, while organizing old books at the library with Tom, he asked. "Have you ever thought about doing something with all that you know?" "I've done my part," she said. Built a business. Grew. Fought. Now I just want to take care of myself. He placed a hardcover on the shelf and replied gently. Sometimes, taking care of yourself means sharing what you've already healed. Those words stayed with her. And that's how the quiet room was born. A basement. A thick rug. Cushions on the floor. A lavender and bergamot diffuser. Chamomile tea served in mismatched cups, not a single one the same. And a note at the entrance. You don't have to pay. But you do have to listen. And be listened to. Claire opened the space to women from the community. Overwhelmed mothers. Exhausted caregivers. Retired teachers who felt invisible. And there, she did what she had always done best. She held space. With presence. With touch. With respectful silence. Meanwhile, those left behind were unraveling. Avery, desperate, tried to keep the company alive. She signed contracts she didn't understand. Paid influencers who promised quick results. But without Claire, there was no heart. The clients disappeared. Employees quit in waves. Lawsuits began to pile up. Ryan, lost, turned to the courts. He filed a petition declaring Claire mentally unfit. Seeking control over the remaining assets. He claimed emotional instability. Voluntary disappearance. And damage to the company's image. But what he didn't know. Claire had already moved everything into a protected trust. Under the name Claire Miller. Managed entirely by Susan. There were no loopholes. No access. No way back. From afar, Susan would send Claire discreet updates. Headlines. Screenshots of online posts. But Claire felt no satisfaction. Only pity. They were lost. Because they had never learned to live with what they had. And she was finally learning how. This time, for the first time. Without carrying the weight of the world on her back. 2 months after Claire disappeared, her children finally realized something they had never imagined. She wasn't bluffing. And they were on their own. Avery hired private investigators. Ryan tried tracking bank accounts. Even the cousins got involved, digging through social media, calling old contacts. Nothing. That's when Susan, quiet as always, received a phone call from Claire's daughter. I know you still talk to her, Avery said, her pride slightly bruised. Tell my mother we need to talk. Susan took a breath. You had 30 years to talk to her. Now, she's finally listening to someone else, herself. And hung up. Claire knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. At the end of September, a handwritten letter was left discreetly at the entrance of her small studio. It was from Ryan. Mom, I've been living in my car for 2 weeks. Avery cut me off completely. I messed up, badly. Maybe it's too late, but if there's anything left in your heart, give me a chance. I don't want your money. I just want to know if you still see me as your son. Claire read the letter. Then read it again. Folded it carefully. She didn't cry. She knew the plea came from a real place, from pain, yes. But also from collapse. And that wasn't love. It was desperation. A few days later, Avery showed up in Maple Bay. In person. She was unrecognizable. No makeup. Hair pulled back hastily. Wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. So this is where you were, she said from the gate of the cottage. Claire wasn't surprised. Do you want to come in? They sat at the kitchen table. The kettle whistled. Claire poured the tea. Avery looked around like she was stepping into a crime scene. I came to say I'm sorry, she said plainly. Not because I need money, but because I realized what I did. Claire held her gaze. And what exactly did you do? Avery hesitated. I used you. I pressured you. I was cruel, arrogant, and treated your love like a given. I thought you'd never leave. Because you were always strong. Claire gave a soft, sad smile. I was strong. But I wasn't made of steel. You confused presence with weakness. Avery sighed. The company's gone. Ryan disappeared. He blames me for everything. And I finally realized. You were the center. And when the center disappears, everything falls apart. Claire didn't respond right away. After a long pause, she stood up, walked over to a drawer, and returned with an envelope. Inside is the address of a women's support center for career transitions. I help fund it quietly. They don't take requests based on status, only effort. If you want to start over, that's where it begins. Avery took the envelope. As if it weighed 3 times more than paper should. And us, Mom? Can we ever? We share blood. But that doesn't mean we have a bond. If you want that, you'll have to stitch it from scratch. In the days that followed, Claire returned to her quiet routines. Tom could tell something had shifted. She moved more lightly now. Like someone who had just walked through a storm. And come back with a face freshly washed by rain. That same weekend, Ryan appeared. Not at her door. But on the bench in the park. Alone. With hollow eyes, a scruffy beard, and a broken soul. Mom. Claire looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see a son. She saw a man. Did you eat today? She asked, without ceremony. He shook his head. Then let's start there. They picked up 2 sandwiches and 2 bottles of water. And walked to the beach deck. They sat side by side. In silence, for nearly an hour. Ryan didn't ask for forgiveness. Claire didn't offer comfort. But when he finished eating, she said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to the community center. They'll help you find a job, if you want it. He nodded slowly, voice low. I don't deserve anything from you. And I'm not giving you anything, she replied calmly. I'm offering it. A chance. 2 years had passed. Autumn in Maple Bay painted the leaves in golden tones as Claire closed the door to the small studio for the last time that week. Inside, the quiet room now welcomed women from across the state. Women who arrived through word of mouth, curiosity, or simply the desperate need to breathe again. But the space was no longer just hers. She had trained 3 women from the community to run it. A retired schoolteacher. A grieving widow. And a young single mother who had arrived shattered. And left blooming. Claire was now simply their mentor. Free to choose her days. She and Tom had become partners. Not just in the kitchen. Or during peaceful walks. Or in the welcome silence of the porch. But in life. They bought a modest home together. With a wide porch and rocking chairs. The kind of home Claire never thought she'd want. But now felt like a permanent embrace. Ethan, Avery's son, born a year after she entered the emotional recovery program, spent summers visiting Grandma Claire. She taught him how to make chamomile tea. And smiled when he said he wanted to. Be calm like Grandma when I grow up. Ryan was slowly rebuilding his life. He worked at a local nonprofit. Rented a small, simple apartment. And sometimes sent his mother letters. Not all were answered. But every single one was read. Avery, on her end, had become a conscious business consultant. She traded high heels for leather sandals. And for the first time, she visited her mother without asking for anything. Sometimes, just to help harvest lavender. One quiet Saturday afternoon. Claire sat on the same beach bench where everything had once begun. Tom sat beside her, reading a book. In her hands, an envelope. It was a letter she had written to herself months ago, but had only now found the courage to open. She unfolded it slowly, and read. Claire. If you're reading this, it means you survived. The pain. The guilt. The absence. And you discovered something rare. That real love doesn't depend on what you give, but on who still sees you, even when you have nothing left to offer. She smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. I thought it was too late, she whispered. Tom looked up from his book. Too late for what? Claire gazed out at the sea. To start truly living. He reached for her hand. She took it. Then live, Claire Miller. The world doesn't end when it falls apart. It begins. When we rebuild it. With fewer walls, and more windows. She had been underestimated. Used. Discarded. Until she chose to disappear. And uncover the truth. And in the end. She didn't return for revenge. She returned. To bloom. If this story moved you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here at Her Journey, every woman has a voice. And always remember. Freedom begins when you stop begging to be seen, and start seeing yourself. See you in the next story.